December, Britain's most famous fictional street celebrated its 50th anniversary with a special live edition featuring a dramatic tram crash which killed off two of Corrie's long-time residents. However, according to the front page of our biggest-selling daily paper, behind the scenes on the anniversary set, there was a terrifying real-life plot, which, had it been successful, would have killed many of the famous faces who inhabit the street.
December the 9th, 2010. Al-Qaeda Corrie threat. Cops are throwing a ring of steel around tonight's live episode of Coronation Street over fears it has been targeted by Al-Qaeda.
19 days later, The Sun carried another article, this time with smaller headlines and tucked away on page 2.
We would like to make clear that while cast and crew were subject to full body searches, there was no specific threat from Al-Qaeda as we reported. We apologise for this misunderstanding.
There's no sense of contrition, no sense of social responsibility. It's almost as if they don't care, provided they can shift newspapers on the back of prejudice against Muslims, all's fair.
I was abused in the street, not just on one occasion. I couldn't even go out my front door properly.
No, we had a lot of bacon found in the garden, in the front garden. We was very scared.
Sarah and Graham Webb-Lee are not Muslim. Since last October, they've been subjected to continuing abuse after objecting when the cafe next door installed a new extractor fan. Yes, you heard that right. This is a story of how a cafe's extractor fan in Stockport became national news.
The owner of the shop next door, she moved the fan closer to my front door. We kept a diary of everything that it was affecting. The smell of our clothes, the smell of our furniture, the kids not eating food because of the smell, very pungent. It's not just bacon smell, it's onion, fat, terrible smells.
When the local council received the couple's complaint about the odours, it emerged that the cafe should have obtained planning permission for the new fan. The council advised them to list all their objections to the retrospective planning application with the intention of getting the owner to move or replace the fan. Graham Webb-Lee went to a public meeting and duly listed his complaints. One of them, right down the list, was that Muslim friends refused to come to their house because of the smell of bacon from the cafe's fan. What he didn't know was a local newspaper reporter was there, and in a few days their case was national news.
Mail Online, October the 21st, 2010. Cafe owner ordered to remove extractor fan because neighbour claims smell of frying bacon offends Muslims.
Daily Telegraph, October the 22nd, 2010. A cafe owner has been ordered to remove an extractor fan because the smell of her frying bacon offends passing Muslims.
5 major newspapers covered the story in similar terms, but Stockport Council's justification for their decision, quoted near the end of all the articles, made no mention of any religious dimension. They said the planning application was rejected on the grounds that it was detrimental to residential amenity. And their verdict, they told us, was based not on the nature of the food being cooked, but on the operation of the extraction system. Yet, following the headlines, Sarah and Graham Webb-Lee were called packy lovers in the street and had bacon thrown into their garden.
We was besides ourselves with disgust because we thought it was such an emotive heading and very misleading.
You thought so too, Graham?
I totally agree. The main fact of it was the vent is 12 inches from our house. It's affecting our everyday life, and all they could report was about our Muslim friends.
This is such a straightforward story, not about Muslims, and anybody with half a brain cell would have looked at the picture in the paper and seen the fan right next to my front door and thought, hang on, I wouldn't want to live near that.
That hasn't placated the Webb-Lees, however, who, because they say of some newspapers, have suffered abuse and harassment all over the sighting of an extractor fan.
I think they should take some responsibility.
Yeah.
For instance, if a racial incident happens through a stupid, sensationalised, Muslim-hating story, then they should be held to account for that. I couldn't go out and stir racial tension up on the street by myself. I'd be arrested of a public order offence. Why can the papers?
A question which Inayat Bangla-Walla would also pose. In March 2008, as Assistant General Secretary of the Muslim Council of Britain, he was denounced as a fanatical extremist on the front page of the Daily Express, a story which implied he was condoning, if not inciting, a terrorist attack on Prince Harry. In fact, he had said that, regrettably, Prince Harry might be a target for terrorists while on armed service in Afghanistan, something which is no more than a statement of fact. But when he saw the write-up...
I came across this story when I was out shopping with my kids in Asda. It was a Saturday, I remember. And I remember seeing the front page, the Muslim extremists threatened Prince Harry. And I remember that a reporter had called me a day before, and I thought, no, that can't be. So I opened the paper and I saw my name, and I was just staggered. I was staggered that a newspaper could act in what is a highly immoral manner.
The Daily Express later apologised and paid £45,000 in libel damages. But according to Professor Justin Lewis from the University of Cardiff School of Journalism, the extremist label ascribed to Inayat Banglawala is by no means unusual.
The 5 adjectives that we found most commonly used in relation to Muslim were, in order, radical, fanatical, fundamentalist, extremist and militant. Muslim extremism is itself now a big story. Muslim moderation is not.
Daily Star, July the 15th, 2010. Muslim-only public loos. Council wastes your money on hole-in-the-ground toilets. Exclusive.
The Star also offered readers the chance to vote on the question.
Are Muslim-only loos just cash down the pan?
Except the loos were not Muslim-only at all. Anyone could use them, and some Muslims were also upset by the squat-style interiors. Oh, and they weren't funded by council money, or indeed any kind of public money.
Daily Express, July the 12th, 2010. Schools forced to delay exams to avoid insulting Muslims at Ramadan. A row erupted last night after schools were given ridiculous guidance to rearrange exams and cancel lessons during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan.
The piece about schools in Stoke-on-Trent suggested sex education classes and swimming lessons might also have to be cancelled during Ramadan.
The diktat is the latest designed to avoid upsetting minorities.
Stoke Labour councillor Ruth Rosenau has a different view of the so-called diktat.
The guidance was asking schools to be thoughtful about the Muslim children when they return to school after the 6 weeks holidays, because in 2010 they went back to school in the last week of Ramadan, which is the hardest week of the fasting month. And it was just asking them to be more thoughtful about if they wanted to be excused from doing games, swimming, and to be aware that they would not participate as fully as they would normally.
Because they hadn't been eating for 3 weeks?
That's right.
And did you say, you know, delay exams or no sex education?
No, at no point have we asked for anything to be delayed or stopped. I got emails and I have to say hate letters saying that we were very wrong, that this is a Christian country and that we should not be, moving exams and telling children they can't do swimming lessons. I took time to reply to everybody and said that this was just a case of national media reporting things wrongly.
Other papers printed much the same story.
Daily Express, July the 6th, 2010. Muslims force pool cover-up. Town hall chiefs were yesterday accused of political correctness gone stark raving mad for forcing pool users to swim in the gloom to protect Muslim women's modesty.
This is Darlaston Leisure Centre in the West Midlands, a big glass building with a swimming pool and gym. And 6 months ago, Walsall Council here put up a translucent film, a sort of like frosted glass, but made of a thickish cellophane, on the lower windows of the pool to prevent people outside from looking in. The Express story of the gloom of the now darkened swimming pool in the West Midlands was also covered in other newspapers, and Walsall Council's statement made it perfectly clear that only 58 of the pool's 250 windows had been covered in the translucent film, which had been installed for the benefit of all swimmers because, according to the council, and I quote, not everyone is confident in their Speedos. Professor Justin Lewis from Cardiff University School of Journalism has analysed coverage of Muslims in the print media from 2000 to 2008 and has continued to monitor how Muslims are portrayed in the press ever since.
The ways in which Muslims are discussed or talked about in the press tend to be in contexts that clearly are rather negative. So it's terrorism, it's about the clash between Christianity and Islam, it's about Islam as an extreme religion. And none of those things, I think, would be things that more moderate Muslims would be very happy with as a form of representation. What we don't see, I suppose, is Islam or Muslims represented in ordinary, day-to-day sorts of ways. It's nearly always linked to those three kinds of stories.
And how many negative stories, as it were, outweighed the positive ones?
By quite a lot. We looked at stories that, what are the sort of most prominent lines of argument that you get in a particular story. And so, for example, 34% of stories we found, Muslims were specifically linked to the threat of terrorism. 26% of stories suggested that Islam was either dangerous, backward or irrational. Now, there were stories, 17% of stories talked about Islam as part of a multicultural society, but it's clearly a much smaller number. And, the next biggest idea that we found in stories was the idea of the clash of civilizations between Islam and the West. 14% of stories, 9% talked about Islam as a threat to the British way of life. So the negative stories very clearly outweighed the positive stories by some degree.
Perhaps the most potent and certainly long-standing example of the clash of civilization reporting is found in the concept called Winterval. Some councils are accused of bowing to Muslim pressure to downplay the Christian festival of Christmas in favour of what is portrayed as a theologically neutral Winterval. Every year, stories are written about councils and other public organisations banning Christmas. Last autumn, the self-styled English Defence League slogan "No Surrender to Militant Islam" wrote to more than 300 councils, warning that thousands of its members would march on any towns which changed the name of Christmas. The EDL calls itself a human rights organisation. Its opponents describe it as an extreme right-wing group. But blogger Kevin Arscott, who has written extensively about Winterval, says these alternative events were never designed to replace Christmas. And was there any suggestion that Christmas was being left out?
Absolutely none whatsoever. The banner saying Merry Christmas across the front of the council house was the same as ever before. The Christmas lights, Christmas trees, carol singing sessions, school choirs. Christmas was exactly the same as it always had been in Birmingham. There was absolutely no change whatsoever.
God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Last September saw Pope Benedict XVI's historic visit to Britain, a perfect opportunity for Christians to celebrate their devotion. But then came this Daily Express headline on September 18th.
Muslim plot to kill Pope. Islamic terrorists disguised as street cleaners allegedly hatched an audacious plot to blow up the Pope. The threatened attack was foiled at the 11th hour. It is feared plotters with links to Al-Qaeda planned a double blow to the infidel by assassinating the head of the Roman Catholic Church and slaughtering hundreds of pilgrims and well-wishers.
There was, in fact, no Muslim plot to kill the Pope or slaughter pilgrims. Within 24 hours, the police, who'd arrested 6 council cleaners in Westminster after a tip-off, released them all again, saying they pose no credible threat. Inayat Banglawala, who's been wrongly accused of being an extremist himself by the Daily Express, is not in the least bit surprised.
Increasingly, newspapers are jumping the gun and gleefully almost reporting that another Muslim plot has been uncovered and it was those sinister Muslims behind it once again. It's almost as if they don't care, provided they can shift newspapers on the back of prejudice against Muslims, all's fair.